Hi, Wallace.
Hello. Happy September.
Happy day.
Welcome to the 12th house. How are you doing?
I'm living. I'm feeling the effects of Mercury retrograde.
It's hard hitting. It's coming in fast, hot, fierce.
It's true. And the full moon, like these bags under my eyes, they do not lie.
No.
The full moon is real.
We might as well just go out and, do a seance. Get freaky with it.
Yeah, exactly. Go find a virgin somewhere, make them light some special candle.
Find a black goat. Exercise it.
This, that, and the other thing. Exactly. I'm feeling the vibes, but what a wonderful conversation we had with today's guest, Katie Dalebout.
An OG in the podcasting world.
Truly, like she is the grande dame of podcasting. She's been doing this for 10 years.
That was not shocking yet shocking.
I know.
Looks like a spring chicken, has been in the game forever. Her podcasting kit was really a big help when we started to get this podcast off the ground. And I was like, what should we use? How do we go about this? I knew nothing. I still know nothing, but here we are.
Not true. You don't know nothing. But it was integral in us starting not just one, but two podcasts.
Yes.
within 1 year.
Right. That's how we do it.
Liked it so much we did it twice.
But she continues to be an inspiration. To be that consistent of a creator is truly remarkable. She has entered into the prolific creation category, and that's part of what we're doing over the next, few weeks, including our wonderful interview with Les of Balanced Black Girl last week. We are talking to creators who have built all different types of communities across many different years. They've pivoted within what those communities look like, and it's just so fascinating to watch their journeys and talk to them about it.
Yeah, and Katie is a full-time creative. So for anyone out there who is balancing their day job and wanting to make content or putting out their podcast by night or writing their Substack on Saturday mornings before the rest of their household wakes up. I think she's such a great example of that's totally possible, because I do remember when she had a full-time job and she was podcasting full-time, and she's made that transition and that leap. And it's something that we talk about a lot in Creators Cashing In, our Notion for Magical Baddies class.
Also coming up.
Yeah, and it's the last class I'm teaching before I go on maternity leave.
Mm-hmm. It's big.
Cash me outside, you guys. If you want to get in, it's going to be a while.
It's going to be a good one. This is such a good time of year to get into that kind of creative, juicy, somewhat hermity vibe. Not that you need to do that, but.
No, it really, I love this. I can relate to that. I love this time of year because I don't feel pressure to make a bunch of new things and get a lot done, but I do feel really supported in planning for what's ahead. Mm-hmm. What's going to happen in 2023 or then in Q1 of the next year.
Yeah.
And I think kind of just knowing the potential pathways. And that's why we wanted to have Katie on and to show people an example of what it looks like. Can demystify that process so much and make it so much easier. Be okay, wait, I can do this. And I just have to take it step by step. So that's what we try to teach in Creators Cashing In. But like I said, I think Katie's such a great example of that. And she's so honest about her struggles too as a creative and a self-professed squiggly brain as well, and how she makes it work for her.
We get into so many different things. Also a lot, kind of a side tangent about friendships and adult friendships and maintaining those, which is interesting because that's something you and I have been talking about a lot, just, privately as we navigate new stages of our life. So we're going to be talking about that more. But she, at the end of the episode, really gets into the details of how she edits her podcast. And
that was so interesting to me. I was like, wow.
I was like, keep going. Tell us.
Yeah.
Because it's so different than how I edit, but also how it's so similar to how I take in information, but I never really thought of editing the podcast that way, nor do I think I would be able to do it in the same way. But I just loved her take on it because she's somebody who's really embodying figuring out the best process that works for you to create the things you want to create. And just because doing it the way that someone said you need to do it doesn't work for you, that doesn't mean you need to abandon it. And she really embodies that. And it was just so nice to hear. I love when people get very specific about how they do things.
Same. I'm like, tell me exactly how you do it. Like, exactly. Don't tell me how you wish you did it. Tell me exactly how it goes for you. And her process is fascinating. So you're going to have to stay tuned and listen to that. It's at the very end of the episode. But the other thing that I really liked that she talked about was our attachment styles and how that shows up in friendships. And so often going and forging your own path, either as an entrepreneur or maybe a spiritual person or a creator, it can feel solitary because you're making something yourself, especially when you first get started. And it's hard to find other people who can relate to that, especially your maybe current friend group or people who you've been close with in the past. And again, I admire Katie so much because she's so good at maintaining connections with people. And that's like a skill that I hope to get better at.
And remembering people's names, we discovered.
Something I'm bad at, something that Katie's great at.
So good at that. Someone said to me the other day, you're great at remembering names. And I was like, oh, you must be terrible at it because if you think I'm good. I was like, well, it's all relative. No, but Katie actually is. I remember I met her super briefly once and then ran into her again and she was like, Wallace. And I was like, well, I know you because you're a celebrity to me.
Yeah, exactly.
So she's so great. It was such a treat.
Yeah. So if you are thinking about starting a podcast, if you're an adult looking for friends, if you are someone with a nonlinear squiggly brain, I think you'll really like this episode. If you're someone with an anxious attachment style, I think you'll love this episode.
If you're a human trying to live in this weird body on Earth.
If you're a human being, you're going to love this episode.
Yeah. We hope.
Cool. Well, without further ado, here's Katie.
Katie, welcome.
Hi.
It feels like we're in the presence of podcast greatness.
We truly are. It's not that it feels like it. We definitely are.
That is so nice and an honor, and I don't think true, but I also don't have a microphone. So I'm the one of us that my microphone setup didn't happen today.
You know, we're edging like dangerously close to Mercury retrograde, so it's honestly not your fault.
Thank you.
But you're here and we're so happy. And we wanted to have you on because you're like you are the creator archetype. Like you are always making and creating and figuring out how to make things because you love making and because you're so good at it. And that's something that we've known each other for a long time now, like almost 5 years, I think, Katie. And that's something I like constantly admire in you is that you're willing to just try projects and experiment, and also that you're incredibly consistent at the same time. Like you've had your podcast for so long, and that is so impressive. So truly an honor to be talking to you.
Oh my God, you're really buttering my bread. I'm getting enough dopamine off this to last me all week. Thank you so much.
This is a dopamine podcast.
I mean, I feel the same way about you, Michelle. Like, I am so in awe of everything that you've done and created just in our friendship. It's been, I've told you this before, like at dinners that we've had, but to see Holisticism from when you started to now is truly wild. And getting to meet you, Wallace, you were just saying, like, I'm so happy for you and I'm so grateful to be here. When I got this email, I like responded instantly and I was like, oh, that's going to be so fun.
Well, before we get into the hard-hitting questions, how did you guys meet?
We were at a not to be named co-working space, and you came to visit me, and we had like the best chat for like hours and hours. And I think we must have met on the internet in some way or connected by someone. But then we met up like really soon after we met on the internet, like days after or something wild like that. And then every other time you came, we would either meet there, do something, and then I came to LA and we did an event together. That was really cool. And then we just have been like pals ever since.
It's true. Yeah. You're really good at this. Like, you are an extroverted introvert, I feel like you are a healthy dose of both because you are so good at talking to people. You're open. You're down to meet up with people. That is not who I am, in my nature. And we ask a transparency question at the top of the podcast, and there's 2 questions. You get to choose which one. And I feel like I know which one I want you to answer. So the first question is, how much money do you make? The second question is, how many friends do you have? You can choose either question to answer. And I'm I kind of want you to answer the friends one if you feel open to it.
I mean, to be honest, I can't really answer both, but I think both are related. And I'll say this. Look, I have a lot of friends. I can't even count them. And I think related, I don't make very much money. It's something I need to work on, actually, especially that I'm, I keep making this joke to my multiple friends, that I'm doing really great for a 25-year-old, but I'm 32. And so it's I need to kind of, I get into saving and, but I really like my life. And I think it can be distracting to have, my grandmother said, you can count your true friends on one hand. And I think there's some truth to that, I think you can only really be close with about 5 people at the same time. And you can only really be a good friend and show up to about 5 people at the same time, and even if you think about it, when you're going through something, to talk about it and to really share the beats with somebody, I don't want to do that with more than 5 people because it's kind of makes you sit in your own shit to talk about it. Or if, things are really great, it's, and I think about friendship a lot. I read about it. I talk about it because I think the way our, my parents' generation dealt with friendship is really different than mine. And then just the way my life is, to be honest, it's kind of been a necessity, especially I've lived in about 1 million different cities. I haven't been in a long-term romantic relationship since, before the pandemic. And I don't have siblings. I'm not someone who's super close with my parents. And so my relationships with people, with friends, are really important to me. And you read me a book, Michelle, you know me, so it's not completely psychic, but my mom is actually, I don't know if I ever told you this, but my mom has worked in HR for 40 years, the same company.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And when I was 9, I'm from Michigan, and she went to Chicago, which is the nearest big city, and got trained in this thing. At the time, I was 2 names, Myers-Briggs. And so I had my first Myers-Briggs test when I was 9.
What?
It was the kids version, yeah. And so she did it to me, and I would do it kind of every couple of years. But what's wild about it is I've always gotten the same one, which, the Myers-Briggs test is it's a spectrum, right? So I'm an ENFP, which is the least extroverted of the extroverts, right? So I kind of need equal amount of time with people and alone. And I think, to be honest, everybody's kind of like that a little bit, right? I think if I'm around people too much, I start to feel overwhelmed and where am I even? And then if I'm alone too much, I start to, get in spirals and in my head too much. But I think everybody, especially with the pandemic, it's even if you're the most introverted, it's good to see people at some point. And even if you're so extroverted, you need to, so it's everyone kind of has that. But I definitely identify with that. And I think especially accidentally moving to LA from New York, in the thick of the pandemic, I somehow fell into I had to make my own community and my friends, and I really invested in that. And I think to the detriment of my work. And you were so kind to say that I try a lot of things, but a lot of that is out of necessity. I'm all right, I'm not a great business person, and that's something I actually need to work on. And one of the reasons why I admire you so much, but it's something that I have all these ideas and I've had some success with some things. And at a certain point, I'm like, all right, well, I'm okay right now. And I'm very slow, and I've allowed that to just be okay and just know that people are on different timelines. And, where I am right now in my early 30s is like, I kind of had more success financially when I was younger, and that's okay because I had some savings now and my overhead's pretty low. And so, to answer the question, a lot of friends, not that much money. I think the two are related because I don't, my life is pretty unmeasured, and I think I was pretty dogmatic and rigid and focused on working 2 jobs at once and didn't have that many friends. Even when I was in New York, I had a lot of acquaintances, but not that many friends. But really here in LA, like I've really invested in my neighborhood and my group of friends and showing up for people because the world was so destabilizing that I had to create my own anchors because I don't really have that many.
We were just talking about this last night. We went out to dinner as a team because it was Janelle's birthday. And we were talking about how often, like when you're in a relationship, it's really hard to make friends, or when you're really focused on your work, it's really hard to create friendships, and how it really feels like you kind of have to pick one or the other.
Mm. I also think too that it's like we're kind of what you were saying. We have different moments where different things take a bigger piece of the pie. So maybe in New York, it was a certain aspect of your work, but here it's been community. And I think it's interesting to see the waves or seasons that those have in our lives, because sometimes when you're trying to force a certain thing to happen, you have to really release into like, maybe this is actually a season for me to build community in LA. And that's my work right now. And we talk a lot about, especially on the 12th house on this podcast, what is our sacred work and how does that change at different times in our lives? And I'm kind of curious if you feel that building community has been part of that here, and how you make meaning out of that right now in your life as you're settling into maybe living here for 2 years, 3 years?
Yeah, it'll be 2 years more. It's been more than 2 years. Whenever the pandemic started, I got here days before lockdown, just visiting, and my stuff was in New York, and I, obviously planned to go back and ship my stuff and never did. And I think I'm really of the mindset, Wallace, like to your point of different seasons of things, like so much of life is out of our control, right? Like I really think that there's this great Eckhart Tolle line, I think, where he's talking about, I think, manifesting, right? Like I think someone's asking him about manifesting or something like that. And he says, who do you think you are to know what it is that you want?
Yes.
Isn't that good?
Mm-hmm. We talk about this so much. I said this to somebody the other day, but go on.
That quote?
Someone was like, do you have a 5-year plan? And I was like, if I asked myself that 5 years ago, like my brain was so small and I don't know what will be right for me in 5 years. And so I've just never really identified with the idea of making, sure, maybe big moves like, do I want a family? Yes, those kinds of things. But trying to manifest certain things when I feel I don't know what will be in alignment for me at that time feels like a fool's errand.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, I think I don't know who said this, maybe Deepak Chopra or something, but someone says like, we can only dream in a fraction of what's capable of us.
Right.
So like, those are all very positive thoughts, and something that I cling to too when I'm feeling down is knowing it's like the tides, right? Where you have a bigger sample size the older you get. So you know that like the tide will change, what comes up goes down, it's cyclical, like that's all very helpful. And then also to know, things can change in a second. Like I was interviewing someone on Monday and I walked into her house and it looked over the mountains in this beautiful place and it was set up so beautifully, and her book I loved so much, and her husband's so cool, and I was just like, wow, this is incredible. And she was I liked her so much. Like, she was so humble, and she was, I was like, oh my God, it's beautiful in here. I come in, and, she's like, I mean, I know it's a lot. Like, I can't believe, which made her so much cooler to me. Like, it's just, the whole thing was really wonderful. And then I had this bizarre experience, which, kind of related slightly, not at all. But Michelle, as you know, and Wallace too, as you know, like I started interviewing people. I started doing this podcast that I still do now, that interview was for, when I was 22, right? And I'm 32 now, so it hasn't been 10 years.
That's so cool.
But what's interesting about this is, like, back then it was purely me getting an hour of someone's time that I admired, and like getting to ask them anything I was curious about. And so from often it was authors, or it was very self-helpy and wellnessy and spiritually, and it kind of, morphed and changed. And the things I was asking were really dictated by what I was curious in each era. But what I realized during this interview was, wow, okay, so here's this person. She's either my age or like slightly younger than me, but our lives are so different, right? It's very aspirational to me. And I assumed the same role as interviewer to this person as I did when I was 22. The only difference was, when I was 22, the people I was interviewing were about 10 years older than me. I was a real kind of wonderkin back then. Like, no one really knew what a podcast was in 2013. And they were like, this young child, basically. Like,
this infant knows recording material. It's amazing.
Yeah, they're like, this college student knows how to get on iTunes. Like, it must be real. It wasn't like what it is now, where it's like everyone knows that it's easy and everybody can have a podcast and it's not that hard.
I mean, we push back on that, but
there's stuff that goes into it, but it's not elite to be able to make something and get it to people's ears, and people are much more aware of the medium than they were back then. But it was just a really interesting experience for me to be like, wow, okay, this is a different era, and I'm having to step into like, all right, I am unable to go into it with the mindset of, do you know how Judd Apatow would interview comedians when he was young? Like, he would interview Jerry Seinfeld, and that was kind of his thing. And I was kind of doing that, where I'm like, all right, I gotta make my own stuff. I'm feeling like I'm moving into a new era. And to your point, and your compliment to me from the top, Michelle, when you were like, I try so many things, and I do, and I throw things at the wall and see what sticks. But I think now I'm really moving into like, things have cycles, and I've tried this thing for a while. I'm figuring out what's next. I did things very out of order too. Like, I wrote this self-help book that came out. I wrote it when I was 25. It came out when I was 26. Like, I'm proud and happy I picked something like journaling that's free and accessible. The topic is journaling, that anyone can do. But also, the cover doesn't really suit who I am now, right? And it's not, I probably would have said some different things in there than I did now. And that was a big successful moment, I guess, to, when my mom saw my book in Barnes & Noble, that meant something, right? But now I'm like, all right, I haven't really had a professional accomplishment of the same caliber since, so it's just like, again, knowing that, all right, well, things can change in a second. And the whole reason I brought up that interview with this person is because something I often ask on the show at the end is, greatest lesson on romantic relationships. And she was telling me that she had met her now husband in, I think, 2018, maybe. And to me, and I guess it was sort of long ago now, but I'm like, that's not even that long ago. Like, things can change in a second. And then you got married, like, a couple of years ago, and now you live here, and like, things are just different for everybody. And I think to judge anybody's timeline, or to judge anybody's, it's hard because I think we do have these societal markers of success that, by 30 you'll have these things and by 40 you'll have these things. But our generation has had some challenges. And again, so much of it is out of our control. Like I didn't think this would be my life when I was 25. I couldn't even conceive. Moving to California was like, I don't know about you, Wallace and Michelle, this is so different for you having grown up here, but in the Midwest, like moving to New York was so what I wanted, especially our generation. We saw on the internet, we didn't really have that on TV, like New York was so glamorized, but I couldn't even conceive of going west. Like I'd never been to California. Like it seems so exotic to me. So, maybe there's something like that I don't even know about in my future.
Oh, totally. It's pretty hard to get a visa from Canada to work in the U.S. And so everyone that I told was like, good luck. Like New York would be easier. California is definitely going to be harder. Like, good luck. And I didn't know what was going to happen. I could have never made up the circumstances that brought me to where I am now. Like to your point about manifesting, so often you can't even dream up what is ahead of you.
We're taking a little break from this tantalizing discussion because, as you probably heard us talk about at the beginning, we have creators cashing in. One of our Notion for Magical Baddies courses coming up, the last one, as Michelle mentioned, that she's teaching before going on a little maternity work hiatus. So we just wanted to mention that, and also mention that if you're kind of not really sure if it's right for you or where you're at in your creator journey, there is a freebie that we have on Notion that's really great for helping determine what type of creator you are and pointing you in a direction of giving you ideas for what content to make.
Yeah, it tells you kind of like where your strengths and also areas of opportunity might be. And that is core for anyone who's a creative because resistance comes up always, and knowing how it's going to show up for you can help you either get through it or, be defeated by it. And we don't want that to happen. We need your beautiful work in the world. And Creators Cashing In is our course based off of the Profitable Content Creator Lab, this gigantic class that I built a couple years ago that hundreds of people have taken, that we decided to make into Notion for Magical Baddies. So it's all live. It's amazing for people with squiggly brains, with ADHD, who have a hard time focusing, or have never finished a digital course before. This is for you. If you want to make money off of your content, or at least learn how you could potentially monetize what you do and the content that you're already making on Instagram, on TikTok, on your email newsletter, on your podcast, you should take Creators Cashing In. There's lots of juicy goods in there, and it's a really incredible community of like-minded people who are both magical, mystical, creative, intuitive geniuses.
And it's also great even if you're not like a solo kind of content creator and you're helping someone else with their content strategy or working at a company in marketing or social media. It's really great for kind of like honing your chops in that area. So it's not only just for individual creators. I think so often big companies are like, we have to hire, the 17-year-old, which is not wrong. Mm-hmm. But sometimes what people are missing in those positions or in marketing positions in general is just like understanding how to generate really sticky content. And that's also something that this course really helps you hone in on, which is really valuable.
Yeah, we've had many content strategists who end up coaching other people on how to make profitable content take this class.
Yes.
So there's lots of ways you can use it. We'd love to have you.
We'd love to see you. And we'll let you now get back to the episode.
It sounds like you have a sense of equanimity and like understanding of how like your world works and makes sense. Like you sound so clear for yourself, and I know you're making jokes about like, I have a lot of friends, but maybe not a lot of money, but you also don't seem like broken up about it. Like it seems very clear that like, yeah, but that's okay. Like these things are okay. It's just a season. And the name holisticism isn't like a real word, right? But it was a word that I started using to describe, like, when people asked me what I believed in, be like, well, I believe in like holisticism. Like, I don't know, not like holistic living, but just like a holistic life, like where everything's included, everything contributes to like who I am. So I'm curious for you, like, if you had to like list out in a sentence, like, or describe what your meaning making system, like how you understand the world right now, what would it be? Like, what's your sort of personal philosophy?
Well, I love the name holisticism. And, when I think about that question, I think it changes. Like, whatever is paramount to me sort of is changing. It's whatever's feeling good at the moment. And I think that, the biggest thing is, what is it like frame? I don't know who said this, but you are an average of the 4 people you spend the most time with. Like, I really believe in that. I really believe in what we take in becomes part of us. I'm very malleable, right? Like, I'm a pretty slow learner and slow reader, but I have a wildly good auditory memory, and I'm really good with names. And I always felt like I wasn't very smart and was behind. And my friend Crystal has pointed out, helped me to understand like a lot of things in the last several years, including a lot of things that you shared with me, Michelle, have been really instrumental in me trying to just understand how I am and be like, all right, this is what I have to work with this time around. Like, I'm not going to be able to change a lot of these things, but what am I good at, and trying to double down on that and focusing more on what I do have and less on what I don't. And a friend of mine who's a comedian says, follow the dream that's also following you, and I think that's really good, because it's like, all right, well, the more instead of pushing or trying or, trying to go in a direction that just isn't opening, that's too much attachment. So I guess I really live by the mindset of non-attachment and trying to not hold too tightly to anything. And there's this great parenting analogy actually about, maybe you've heard this, or maybe I'm giving you your first piece of parenting advice. Mine's the person with like the less amount of time around children, but they say hold it like a bar of soap, right? Like, if you hold it too tightly, it's going to spurt out and go really far. But if you hold it too loosely, you'll obviously drop it. So I try to hold everything like a bar of soap. Easier said than done. I have moments of being like, oh man, I hope, this is okay right now, but like, I'm not going to feel this way in the future. Of course I have moments of anxiety, but I try to just like do what I can every day, take my time, and then, the other, so like, I guess it would be non-attachment and focusing on people, going back to my friend Crystal, she's really helped me to see like, we really speak in human design with each other. I think she sort of knows more about it even than I do.
Is she a projector too? Is she a projector like you?
Oh, you're a projector also.
Yeah.
Two projectors.
And I very much identify with that. And Michelle and I have had conversations about this. I think we even did something for Holisticism with this a while ago.
Yeah, we did a little summer solstice event on that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I felt more articulated by that system than anything else, and especially being a projector. But Crystal's mom is a projector, and so it's really helped her to see her mom and myself of, we're really slow at a lot of things, and we, because our path is like saying hi to so many people in the front, and her mom and I have a lot of parallels. And she compared me to, have you guys seen Erin Brockovich?
Yeah.
Yeah, I rewatched it a month ago.
Oh, really? That's funny.
Yeah.
I love when things like
Yeah.
Well, that scene where like the new lawyer comes in and she's like, this is a mess. It's so disorganized. Like, how have you been doing this? And she's like in her suit or whatever. And then Julia Roberts as Erin Brockovich is like, which one of those files do you need to know something about? Like, to ask me a question. And she does begrudgingly. And then Julia Roberts' character is, Erin Brockovich, and she rattles off their name, phone number, everything about their kids, like knows everything. And Crystal so kindly was like, you're like that. And then I thought about him like, I reframed something that I felt so bad about as this power that I had. And I've really taken that on as an identity. And, even like friends in my neighbor, like I get coffee with the same dudes every morning, and they say to me like I'm really good with names, and they all seem to be bad with names. And they've now like come to me and been like, wait, what was that guy's name? Or like, what is it? And I'm like, okay. And I feel like I'm Anna Wintour or Emily Blunt's character in Devil Wears Prada. And I feel like I'm kind of doing that. And all of that to say, I think my big organizing principle is like, when I was really, really depressed after a breakup, and you saw me in the thick of that, Michelle, my mom left me this voicemail that I will, talking about this always makes me cry. But I was walking to therapy. I was walking through Union Square on my way to therapy, and I listened to this voicemail from my mom because essentially I had so much on my plate. I was working a full-time job and doing everything I do now on the side, and I didn't have much left. Like, I wasn't that great of a friend. I wasn't that great in my relationship. It was hard. And my mom was like, oh God, she said, I didn't teach you this very well, and I didn't really have a choice because it was just my mom, and she was working a ton, and she was never really around. She said, oh my God, the work will always be there. The people might not. And I learned that the hard way, and I showed you that the hard way. So I hope that you do what I couldn't and what I didn't. And, my mom, her life has been like making sure I was okay, alive, and working so she could do that, and taking care of her parents who are now gone. And like, that's kind of it. And so I heard that, and it got me to travel a lot, and then got me here. And, I think also too, like, again, with things being out of my control, like I wasn't expecting the pandemic, obviously. So it was kind of like, all right, well, I'm not going to focus on work right now because I don't even know, I don't really want to elevate. I write personal essays about my feelings. I don't know if that's really relevant right now with everything going on, and I want to elevate other people. And so I just sat still, and I picked a place, and I doubled down with what was working, and I tried to create relationships with the people around me. And, I'm in the sort of flow of trying to figure out figuring out the next thing. But yeah, that bit from my mom really got in me.
That's a hard one lesson too.
Oh yeah.
My dad said something similar to me when I went to school for dance. He was like, you can always make more money, but you can't get time back. So like, go do what you want to do, and don't worry. Like, you'll figure it out. You'll figure out how to make money if that's what you want to do in the future. But go be a poor artist. It's all good. And he can't do that. Like, he missed that. And I think what a gift for our parents to be able to recognize that and be able to say it to us while we're young, not like while they're on their deathbed, because that so often happens too. So that that's truly like, I think what parents are here for, right? Like, I don't want to make the same mistakes that he did. And it sounds like that's pretty emotional for you too.
I feel that very deeply, and kind of to your point earlier in the conversation, especially when you feel like your friends and your community are your chosen family. Like, if you don't feel as close to your family, and that's not like your pod, then it's like everyone around you takes on a different sense of meaning, and you kind of have to work with how they relate to friendship versus family too. It's such a important and interesting thing, I think, to talk about and externalize too within friendships.
Yeah, and I don't think it's talked about enough, actually, because friendship's a really complex relationship, right? I think especially as you get older. And I think group dynamics are really complex, right? In a group dynamic, people are more apt to talk about other people, right? Because it's interesting, it's cozy. It's like, it's fun to talk about other people,
Yeah.
but it's not really very interesting. And I try to not do it because it teeters on gossip, and I don't want to be a part of that, right? And so, but it sometimes is like the currency a group dynamic works in.
Yes.
Totally.
So I'm really trying to, and I've always been like this. Like I've always been a floater, if you will. Like I'm around a lot. I'm kind of cool with everybody, but I'm not really like the leader of anything, and I'm fine with that. But I think as we get older, it's like, what I'm honestly learning is, because I have friends of all different ages, is like, it's all the same. Like it really, like a group dynamic friendship, it's like, doesn't change. It's, if anything, it's like more immature as you get older. And,
for real.
So that, and also it's voluntary. Like there's nobody, there's no contract, there's no, and so I think a lot of attachment theory is coming up for me within these group dynamics. And my friend Maddie, at the newsletter I'm about to write, or about to send out, I just wrote about this, but basically I was feeling a lot of insecurity, I guess, in a group dynamic friend-wise. And she articulated that book we all read maybe a couple years ago, Attached. Like she kind of articulated that in a way where I like finally understood that book, where she said to me, for an anxiously attached person to feel relaxed in a dynamic, be it friendship, be it romantic, whatever, they need to have some sort of commitment, and that can just be validation of reciprocal feelings, like a text, a plan, like it can be not much. And then for an avoidant attached person to feel good in a dynamic, they need to sense that the other person is relaxed. But that's a catch-22 there of like how each of those will work, right? And so one solution in like a romantic relationship is just be like, those two don't go together. You need to be with someone secure, right? And just break up, and that's that. But it's more complex in friendships or neighbors or work relationships, because it's like, I don't know that many purely securely attached people right now, but I know a lot of really lovely anxious and avoidance that I'm friends with, and I want to learn to interplay within those dynamics. And so you have to just know that like friendship takes time. You can't force it. As we get older, in our 20s, this is something that Crystal taught me too. We tend to talk about like our woes with each other and want to help each other and are like, this is so terrible and my work and not this and my, but then as you get older, like everyone's shit gets harder, basically. Like your parents are dying, your kids, you have so much, I mean, it's bleak, but it's like,
life really starts to go down the tube after 30.
Yeah. So then she was like, what you want from your friends is to like someone to have fun with on a Friday and not talk about that stuff. So it's like, but also some of us need connection and like need to process that with someone, even when you're in therapy, even, whatever. So it's kind of like just knowing the dynamic and not asking to, like, it's a lot of reading the room, and I'm very socially aware because I've had to a fault, again, why I'm like sometimes anxious where I'm like not getting my own shit done because I'm so reading the room and making sure everyone's okay and like who needs pizza and but it's like there's just a lot of dynamics at play there. And
it's like on the one hand we want these relationships that are uplifting, but we also want this like raw realness that comes with the challenges of getting older too, where we're like, we can let down and we can say like, I'm having a hard time right now, and know that the other person is going to be able to hold that space.
Yeah, exactly. It's about like being able to know what other people have the capacity for, and knowing who to go to and diversifying your portfolio of friends, I think is useful.
Yeah. And to your point at the top about lots of acquaintances and maybe 5 friends, right? Which I feel like is true for most of us. I think adding the internet and what we share on the internet, especially as creatives who like often share our process and what we're going through and like what is hard, like you write personal essays and you talk so openly about what you're going through, Katie. When we share that with acquaintances, we don't always get like hey, I saw what you wrote, or like listen to that podcast episode, or I know what you're going through. And it can be like a little bit weird sometimes because you're like, oh, I got the Cliff's Notes version of your life, but I don't like know, but I kind of know. And I haven't exactly like said it to you out loud, sort of like said it into the universe. And I think that can add a layer of complexity when we're navigating, especially like not those close ties, but the people that we like see, you know, every few weeks or months.
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of teeters on parasocial relationships, right? Where it's like, I've had an interesting experience where I've had people feel like they know me from my work, and I'm like, oh, you kind of do. I need to know you. But then I've had this, you know, equally as odd situation where I've had a parasocial relationship with someone and then, you know, for the last 10 years punctured it by meeting them and talking to them. And, it is interesting because, and then I've had people that this is another odd thing that I'm dealing with is I've had people in my real life who I've met in person, and then they're like, oh, what do you do, whatever. And then if I end up getting close with them, it's so sweet and I'm honored, but then they'll like go in and listen to the podcast or they'll like sign up for my newsletter. And then that kind of gets in my head of like, oh, well, like which one? And now you know something. And like, that's kind of odd too. But then it starts to change where I'm like, I used to teach yoga, and whenever a friend would come or someone I was excited about was there, I kept being like, what they think of that? What they think of that? You know, like what they think of the song I played, you know, and I'm catering to one person. So I'm cool. Like I need to teach the class. And so then I find myself like thinking about, oh, this one person might listen or might, you know, and that's like, and then almost wanting them to like see me and like know more, like, people who read my stuff might know more about me than a new friend knows about me. And I want them to. So it's very complicated.
It's like the circles of friendship becoming concentric and intersecting. And then you're like, wait, I don't know if I wanted that one like that. And maybe you could go over there or come in here.
Yeah.
And beyond our control. Well, one of the things we love to also ask about, because we're obsessed with tools and different habits and always learning about new mental models and meaning-making systems, if there's anything new in your life right now, or it doesn't have to be new, that you feel like is a very great guiding force to keep you kind of on your path in that flow that you were talking about. Could be a book, could be an app, could be a philosophy.
Oh, I'm so interested in what other people have said to this question. It changes for me often. I mean, my really big thing is walking. Like I need to be walking like 4 hours a day, just like baseline, like.
I like that you said I need to be walked, as if you're like, I need to walk myself. I need to be walked. I love that.
True. I think more than a lot of the dogs that I babysit, like I need walking.
Yeah.
But like alone time, walking, it's really good for my brain to be doing two things like that, where I'm listening to something or talking on the phone while walking. As Michelle knows, I send a lot of voice texts and I listen to a lot of voice texts. I'm in long voice text exchanges with friends who don't live here. You know, they'll send me 40, 50 minutes and I'll send them, you know, more than that.
Oh, I love that.
It's like very Felicity vibes, how they would communicate back and forth.
Yeah. I mean, that is honestly like my most consistent, biggest, like just so useful for my brain. And, you know, so voice texting, I guess, and through that the Apple iPhone interface for voice texting is garbage. Like if someone calls or goes away, it's hard to hold your.
Yeah.
So I use WhatsApp and I use Signal. Those are really good. There's several other ones, but those two are much better. Like it holds it when you, when someone calls, like, and if I know I'm going to be voice texting a lot with a friend, I like make them get the app. And then also, you know, I do creative consulting. So I work with people one-on-one and we do sessions on the phone. And then between sessions, I used to get into these long email exchanges with people asking questions, and that's really hard for me. Like that takes me so long, but I can talk, like as everyone here knows. So I just have people do voice text with me. And so they'll send me a signal and I'll send them back if they have a question about something. So I'll also, you know, as I'm talking to my friend Crystal or I'm talking to my friends Erin and Noah in Australia, and then I'll go in and I'll, you know, answer some work related questions or questions about, you know, it doesn't even feel like work. The people that I get to work with, it's so creative and cyclical, the process that they do with them. So that's really cool. And so I love those apps. And then, you know, I listen to the podcast while I'm walking, like my podcast editing, like I edit while I'm walking. So I'll go into Dropbox and I'll listen to the episode how other people would listen to it, right? Like I'm listening in headphones, I'm multitasking. And so then I can know like what needs to go, what needs to stay in. And in the notes app in my phone, I write down timestamps of like, I want this cut out, I want to keep this in, or like I need to move this here. So that's how I can do it. And a lot of this came out of necessity. Like I didn't want to be sitting alone in my studio apartment. I don't have a office or a workspace. It's hot in there. Like I wanted to be out and walking, and this allows me to do that. And there's even this app that I use too. It's called Speechify. Do you know that app?
I feel like I've heard of it, but I don't know what it is.
It's worth every penny. And it can take any article or any link, or like I'll put an email in there and it reads it to you. And that's really useful for me too, of like, again, slow reader, fast, like auditory learner. So that's been it's really good for people with ADHD. It's a really great app. And I also put like if I'm, you know, recently I did this, like I've been working on this essay for like a year and a half and a zine for like, I'm very slow with a few things that I will come out very soon, but I put those in there and then it's like version 758 or, you know, whatever it is. And then I'll listen to it while I'm walking, and you can, you know, everyone knows this, right? You know, the best editing tool is reading something out loud, you know, so when you have someone reading it out loud, I'll just notice mistakes, first of all, of just like straight up typos, or like, oh, I meant challenging and I said change or whatever. And I'll take a screenshot and I'll like highlight what needs to change. So that's really helpful. And because I noticed that if I do that just sitting down at my desk, I'm not as likely to hear it, even if I am listening, because I'm looking over here, I'm in a different tab.
The stimulation of walking, like, probably helps you focus.
It really, really helps me. So that, I think walking with a combination of all of those apps, and we use Asana for the podcast, which, do you guys use that? The project management?
We've all used Asana on the team before, but we Notion.
Thought you meant that you record in Asana.
No, honestly, I wouldn't put that past me.
I know. I was like, that's a great sound booth. Well, no, it's a multi-purpose container. I think that's so much of what you said resonates so deeply, because I think why I have been so drawn to podcasting as a listener and a creator is because I also learn very quickly auditorily. But hearing you articulate how you've had all of these workarounds to find what works best for you, you know, not to say, oh, I can't edit the podcast sitting at my desk, so this isn't for me. It's like, no, actually, it works for me when I'm in motion, when I'm walking. And you figured out entirely new system that is fascinating and I want to pull from. And it's so great to hear you articulate that, because it's such a good example of, this wasn't working for me, but it doesn't mean that this thing is not for me. I just need to find a way that suits my learning style. I love that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I had a lot of shame about like not being great at school and not being great at, I was fine in school, but like I got through it how I've gotten through everything else, which was like, I think I baked cookies for my college math professor to like get me through those courses. You know what I mean? So like I did fine, but it was not easy. And I think knowing, again, like going back to, I had a lot of shame being like, well, I'm not actually smart if I'm listening to audiobooks or I'm getting my information that way. Like I'm not well read, actually, it turns out. But I don't know if this is true or not, but I feel like it's like however you get the information, if you're listening to it on an audiobook or you're reading it, like I don't know if one is better or worse than the other. Like I don't think we should have a moral judgment with that.
I'm with you. I mean, one of the smartest people I know gets pretty much his information only from video and audio because he can't like read very well or easily. Like he's dyslexic, so it takes him a lot longer. And we're so lucky that we have all of these other forms of information to pull from. And I think to your point, like we should have no judgment about that. That's really like a gift.
Yeah. I think he'd like this app.
Yeah, a Speechify, I'm all about it. I'm also obsessed with this podcasting app, Descript.
Katie, you would like it.
I think you would like it because you can edit. Basically, it'll transcribe everything and you can edit from the transcription. So you can highlight a sentence and then delete it and it just pulls the exact audio.
Cool.
It's incredible. And it's very easy to use.
Yeah. And it's like a good edit. It doesn't sound like, it's really amazing.
They should sponsor us. I've told so many people about this app.
We should. Let's put a pin in that. we gotta reach out to them.
We will talk about it for free. So
seriously.
What would you whisper to, you maybe 5 years ago, or you when you first moved to LA? You could, pick a time. What's something that you would kind of just whisper gently in your ear?
Oh my gosh. I think I've learned more in my last few years here in LA than I did all of my 20s because it's just been truly wild, truly nothing I could have conceived of. And honestly, I think I had to move through everything exactly as I did. To learn what I needed to learn. So I would probably honestly just say, like, buckle up. It's going to be a wild ride. Like, there's a world in which I would say that. Or, maybe I would say, like, try to not be so attached. Try to, diversify where you're putting all your energy. Because I think I do, as much as we're talking about friendship and these lessons that I've learned, and I seem really, emotionally and socially aware. It's because of trial and error. It's because of getting too attached here and not enough there and putting all my eggs in one basket and wishing that, there's this line of a Parquet Court song where I think they say, I want to not want this so much or something like that. And I think I would say something like that to myself of like, just calm down. I get really excited about things and people like a golden retriever where I'm just like, I'm so excited to be here. And that I lose myself a little bit. Like I get tongue tied of that analogy that I gave from my friend Maddie where I'm the anxious person in that situation. So I was, especially when I first got here, because my life was in such a malleable place. My career was in such a malleable place. I was looking for anchors everywhere and trying to find them. And the world was in such a wild place. So it was kind of all these factors converging, and it feels really uncomfortable to be an anxiously attached person around an avoidantly attached person, where you're trying to get that validation of reciprocal feelings or to get some sort of connection with people. I'll speak for myself, I was mirroring whatever they were doing, right? So, and this happens in friendship dynamics, this happens whatever, but I was finding myself, everything I was saying was like hoping that it would be something that they liked. And I would do this I've done this with so many people since I moved here, where I'm trying to be liked, right? Where I'm not wanting to disagree with them because I don't want to rock the boat, and I'm not, I'm really a shell of myself. I'm not really being myself at all because I'm trying so hard to get those, that validation. And that's such a shitty feeling because you can't connect from that place. There's no ability for connection. And that's really scary because you also feel misunderstood by the other people because they're not actually seeing you. They're seeing this shell of you. So I try to keep it tight, but I would try to explain that because that's something I've learned recently. And by experience of trying so hard to be liked and pushing and, I've done it, since I was a kid, but I think we can't control, this is what I would say. We can't control how other people feel about us and how they perceive us. So constantly being in my head and running through these 3 questions. What I'm terrified that they're perceiving me as, what I hope they're perceiving me as, and what are they actually perceiving me as, at all 3 at the same time, like a ticker tape, then I'm missing the conversation. Like I'm not really there. And an interesting experience of editing my podcast is that I can see whenever I'm doing this with another person, right? Because I go back and edit it and I can see like, oh, you said that out of ego. That was your ego. Your ego just wanted them to know that you also know that person. And part of it is like kind of noble. It's like I wanted them to feel comfortable but the nice thing about the podcast is that I can edit it out. It just comes on out. Nobody knows it.
We love that about this medium.
Yeah, we love that. But in live, unrecorded conversation, like that's not an option. So it's made me more aware of like, oh man, you didn't really need to say that. You didn't really need to insert yourself there. You didn't really need to, so I'm really being discerning and trying to, like the 4 agreements, be impeccable with my word. And that's something that I have been learning so much and so rapidly in the last 2-3 years since I've been here that, again, easier said than done. And I don't know what Don Miguel Ruiz would say about like when you get tongue tied around someone or when you feel uncomfortable in a dynamic or, this happens with strangers or it happens with, it's not just anxious and avoidant. It's like anytime someone feels uncomfortable or you put someone on a pedestal or you feel uncomfortable, you're very likely to go into that mode of like, how am I being perceived? And then there's not connection. And then that creates loneliness. You get no dopamine from that and you're depleted and deflated. And so I'm really trying to that's something I can't stop talking and thinking about right now.
That's, I think, the 3rd time that book has resurfaced recently. I feel like in conversation with people, it's so interesting that you bring the 4 agreements up because it feels like one of those books that is now, we're talking about what is canon, like in the Holisticism universe. And I feel like that's totally one of them because it just constantly keeps reminding us of these very basic, very difficult things that we're always striving towards. But noble pursuits.
It's such a good one. I love that one. I read that, once a year. I feel like there's a couple books that I read, The Artist's Way is like a big one for me.
Oh, I've never completed it. That's one of my biggest, one day I will complete that.
Yeah, I don't know. Again, I think it's something cyclical, but also it's like take what you want, leave the rest. You can go in with one agreement and, zero. I don't know.
Definitely. Katie, where can people find your podcast, your work, what's happening in the Katie universe? How can people connect with you?
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm just a Google away. I'm at Katie Dalebout on Instagram, and Let It Out. The podcast has its own Instagram. It's Let It Out with 3 T's because one was taken, and my website is Let It Out with 3 T's as well. And I do one-on-one creative consulting, and then I have this workshop called In Process. So I am launching that again, which is really cool. So it's about like people in process, people who, it used to be called creative underdogs because it's people who have a lot of interest and do a lot of things, but want more focus and want more connection, and making things is often very lonely. And so I wanted connect. So we do a work session together. It's cyclical, and I've been doing it since the beginning of the pandemic, but we meet 3 times a month, and we do, kind of like a Dharma talk where we'll talk about whatever's coming up for me. And then everyone shares, kind of what they're working on. Someone started a coffee shop in the last one. Someone started a sake brand. Somebody is a writer, yoga, it's like everybody. It's so lovely, and it's a real extension of the podcast. And then we do a work session together, and I bring guests in, and it's really lovely. And the theme of this one, I'm changing a little bit how I'm doing it this year, but this year it's going to be, each one's going to have a theme, and the theme for this year is focus. So that's going to be cool if people want to learn about that. And then the podcast is called Let It Out. I have a second podcast called Spiraling, a mental health show that I co-host with my friend Serena Wolf, and it's about anxiety, and we're doing season 4 of that, which is starting at the end of September. And I have my podcast course if people do want to start podcasts that you two did. So that's called the Podcast Kit, and
it's great.
You recommend it?
Yeah, you're so kind about recommending that. Truly, that meant so much to me.
Oh, it got us started.
I mean, that is like the most incredible case study, because this podcast is so incredible. I feel like a couple of months ago, I was either with Michelle or I texted you, maybe like a year, like a long time ago. I was like, everyone is talking about your podcast. Your podcast is incredible. It makes me so happy that I was even, part of this incredible show happening. So it's a real full circle to be here.
Well, thank you, Katie. This was so much fun. You're just such a wealth of knowledge, and I love watching you grow as your friend. I'm always so impressed by you in so many different ways, and I don't know what you believe your sacred work is, but I feel like watching you and getting to witness you, you are being human and teaching the rest of us how to do it with grace. And that is such a gift, because so few people get that and get that opportunity and take that opportunity. So just thank you for being.
Yeah, seriously.
Oh, that's so
I can't wait to re-listen to this already.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much. I mean, I feel that way about you, Michelle, and watching your work. I mean, it's so inspiring to me, truly. I don't even use that word often. So thank you so much, both of you.
Thank you so much, Katie. This was such a treat.
Okay, and that's our episode. Thank you so much for listening. And if you like the 12th House podcast, if you could give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, we would honestly pledge our undying love to you forever and ever.
We'll remember your name. We'll shout you out.
We'll be securely attached to you.
Yes.
As friends. And we wanted to read this week's 5-star review from Ash Marie 333. Continues to get better. I've been following along with Holisticism for about 3 years. I personally find it inspiring. I don't listen to every episode of the podcast. That's okay. Listen, that's all good.
Hey.
But I listen to at least a couple a month, and it's one of the only podcasts I find myself coming back to. The classes are also top notch. Highly recommend. Ash.
So sweet.
We love you.
We love you, Ash Marie 3333333.
Yeah. If you could leave a review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, just give us 5 stars. That makes a huge difference. We love making this podcast and offering it to you for free, and getting to interview incredible people. And the more wonderful reviews we have, the more downloads we have, the better people we can get on this podcast.
It really helps.
Thank you in advance for helping us out.
Thank you. And we'll see you next week with another Creator Series episode. Bye.
See you then. Bye.
The 12 Pies is produced by yours truly, Wallace Miller Blanchard. Our theme music is made by Nathan McKay, and our wonderful editing is done by Softer Sound Studios, who you can find more information about in our show notes.